Stay with me, because by the end of this night, one billionaire would lose everything he spent his entire life building. The slap cracked through the grand ballroom like a firecracker on the 4th of July, sharp enough to silence 200 wealthy guests beneath the crystal chandeliers of the Sterling Foundation Gala. Champagne glasses froze halfway to painted lips. Conversations died instantly. Even the string quartet near the marble staircase stopped playing mid-note. Claire Whitmore stood motionless beside table 12, one hand instinctively resting over the curve of her 7-month pregnant belly while the other trembled around the stem of a shattered champagne flute. A thin line of sparkling liquid dripped onto the polished black floor beneath her heels. Across from her, Damien Sterling adjusted the cuff of his tailored tuxedo with the calm indifference of a man fixing a minor inconvenience instead of humiliating his wife in front of Manhattan's elite. His steel gray eyes scanned the crowd, not with guilt, but irritation. "You embarrassed me," he said quietly, his voice colder than the December wind rattling the ballroom windows 70 floors above downtown Manhattan. Claire blinked once. The left side of her face burned, but it was not the pain that stunned her. It was the cameras. Phones had already risen around the room like a field of glowing knives. Someone near the bar whispered her name. Someone else muttered, "Oh my God, she's pregnant." The baby shifted suddenly inside her stomach, a nervous flutter that tightened Claire's chest harder than the humiliation itself. Then came the clicking sound of stilettos against marble. Vanessa Hale. Her scarlet evening gown shimmered beneath the chandelier light as she approached Damien's side with the confidence of someone who believed she had already won. Tall, elegant, flawless, she slipped her manicured fingers around Damien's arm as though Claire no longer existed. "Maybe next time," Vanessa said with a faint smile. "She'll learn how to behave in public." A few nervous guests looked away. Others watched more closely, hungry for scandal the way wealthy people always were when it belonged to someone else. Claire felt the room tilting slightly around her. The music, the lights, the whispers spreading table to table faster than wildfire through dry grass. She lowered her eyes to the gold charity program crushed in her hand. Sterling Foundation Winter Hope Gala. Her name sat beneath Damien's in elegant silver lettering. Claire Whitmore Sterling. The irony almost made her laugh. 3 years earlier, Damien had stood on a beach in Malibu promising to protect her forever while waves crashed behind them and photographers captured every perfect angle. America had called them the golden couple. Financial magazines worshipped him. Lifestyle blogs envied her. But fairy tales looked different under ballroom lighting at midnight. "Say something," Damien muttered under his breath, forcing a smile for nearby investors. "And stop looking pathetic." Claire slowly raised her eyes toward him. For one dangerous second, the room disappeared completely. No cameras, no billionaires, no chandeliers. Just the realization that the man standing in front of her no longer feared losing her. And powerful men became reckless the moment they stopped fearing consequences. Near the back of the ballroom, a security guard shifted uncomfortably beside the surveillance monitors. On one of the screens, the slap replayed silently from another angle. Clear, undeniable, permanent. Claire inhaled slowly, steadying herself while Damien turned back toward his guests as though the moment were already over. But it was not over, not even close, because hidden beneath the Sterling Tower beneath their feet were ownership records worth $600 million. And not a single person in that ballroom knew the pregnant woman Damien Sterling had just humiliated in public secretly owned the building they were standing inside. Claire did not cry until the elevator doors closed. The moment the private elevator began descending from the ballroom floor, her reflection appeared in the mirrored walls around her from every angle at once. Pale face, shaking hands, silver maternity gown clinging softly around her pregnant stomach. She looked like a woman trapped inside someone else's life. The baby shifted again, beneath her ribs, slower this time, and Claire pressed her palm gently against her belly as though apologizing for the chaos outside. 48 floors above the city streets, laughter still echoed faintly through the elevator shaft. The gala had already moved on without her. Wealthy people always did. Damien Sterling understood that better than anyone. Embarrassment faded. Headlines faded. Public sympathy faded fastest of all. But power survived everything. That was the lesson Damien repeated constantly during their marriage, sometimes with words, sometimes with silence. Claire remembered the first apartment they shared in Tribeca before Sterling Global became a billion-dollar empire. Back then, Damien still carried coffee for her during late nights and kissed her forehead while she worked beside him reviewing contracts. He used to call her brilliant. He used to ask her opinion before every major decision. Then the company grew. Investors arrived. Cameras appeared. Somewhere between private jets and Forbes magazine covers, Claire slowly disappeared from her own marriage. At first, the changes felt small. Damien hired assistants to manage her schedule, stylists to choose her clothes, security teams to monitor where she went. Then came the rules. Smile more at charity events. Do not interrupt meetings. Stop questioning financial transfers. Stop talking about returning to work. You do not need stress while pregnant, Damien would say with that calm corporate voice that sounded reasonable to everyone except the person trapped inside it. Claire had spent 3 years becoming smaller so Damien Sterling could look larger beside her. The elevator doors opened into the underground parking garage with a soft chime. Cold December air swept through the concrete level carrying the scent of rain and gasoline. Her driver Marcus stood immediately when he saw her expression. "Mrs. Sterling?" he asked carefully. Claire shook her head once before he could say anything else. "Just take me home." Marcus nodded silently and opened the back door of the black Escalade. As the SUV pulled away from Sterling Tower, Manhattan blurred outside the tinted windows in streaks of white. Headlights and Christmas decorations. Couples hurried beneath glowing storefronts carrying shopping bags and coffee cups while taxis splashed through wet streets below giant electronic billboards, flashing luxury perfume ads 30 feet high. New York looked beautiful at night if you ignored what people sacrificed to survive there. Claire leaned her head gently against the glass. Then her phone vibrated. One text message. Unknown number. Her heartbeat slowed instantly the moment she opened it. "I saw what happened tonight. Do not trust Damien. Check the Zurich account before morning." Claire stared at the message twice, then 3 times. Zurich account. Her stomach tightened harder than before. Damien had mentioned Zurich only once nearly 8 months ago during a late-night phone call he abruptly ended when she entered the room. At the time, she ignored the feeling in her chest telling her something was wrong. Tonight, that feeling returned sharper than broken glass. Claire opened the banking application Damien believed she could not access anymore. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the account loaded. Her breath caught instantly. Transfer completed. $87 million moved offshore 72 hours earlier. Multiple corporate holdings transferred out of Sterling Global. Beneficiary hidden. Claire's fingers went cold. Outside the SUV window, snow began falling softly across Manhattan. Inside the darkness of the back seat, Claire finally understood something terrifying. Damien Sterling was not preparing for a marriage. He was preparing for an exit. And somehow, he believed she would never see it coming. The penthouse felt too quiet after midnight. Claire stepped inside Sterling Tower's private residence and immediately noticed the absence of music, staff movement, or Damien's usual late-night conference calls echoing from his office upstairs. The silence felt unnatural, like the building itself was holding its breath. Snow drifted softly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, while the city glowed gold beneath the storm clouds. Normally, Claire loved this view. Tonight it felt cold and distant, like a painting hanging inside someone else's house. She slipped off her heels near the marble staircase and moved slowly through the living room, one hand supporting the weight of her stomach. The baby had become restless again. Her doctor said stress could do that. Damien called it overreacting. Claire crossed toward the kitchen for water when another light caught her attention. Damien's office door upstairs stood slightly open. That alone was unusual. Damien locked that office obsessively. Even the cleaning staff were forbidden to enter without permission. Claire hesitated at the bottom of the staircase while rain tapped softly against the glass walls of the penthouse. Somewhere deep in her chest, instinct whispered the same warning it had all evening. Something was wrong. She climbed the stairs carefully, each step slow beneath the weight of pregnancy exhaustion. The office lights glowed faintly across dark hardwood floors. Damien was not home yet. His cufflinks sat beside an unfinished whiskey glass on the desk. One ice cube remained half-melted inside amber liquid. Claire stopped when she noticed the safe hidden behind the abstract painting near the bookshelf was open by less than an inch. Damien never left things unfinished. Ever. Her pulse quickened. The room smelled faintly of cologne and expensive leather, familiar scents that suddenly felt unfamiliar in the quiet darkness. Claire moved toward the desk and saw several papers spread carelessly beside Damien's laptop. Property transfers, offshore holdings, corporate restructuring documents. Her name appeared repeatedly across the pages beside signatures she did not remember making. Claire's throat tightened. She picked up the top document slowly. Emergency spousal liability separation agreement. Effective immediately. Her vision blurred for half a second. Then another paper caught her eye. A sonogram appointment schedule. Not hers. Vanessa Hale. 11 weeks pregnant. Claire froze completely. The city lights outside flickered against the windows while her mind struggled to process the words in front of her. Damien had not just been moving money. He had been building another future. Another family. The realization settled over her like ice water. Suddenly footsteps echoed faintly from downstairs. Male laughter followed by Vanessa's unmistakable voice floated through the penthouse entrance. Claire instinctively stepped backward into the shadows beside the bookshelf just as Damien entered the office below. She suspects nothing, Vanessa said casually. Her heels clicked across marble. After tonight, she looked too broken to think clearly. Damien gave a quiet laugh Claire had never heard before. Relaxed. Careless. The divorce will be finalized before the baby arrives, he replied. By then the board will already approve the transfer. Claire's hand tightened around the documents hard enough to crumple the edges. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. And the penthouse? Vanessa asked. You promised me this place. Damien paused for one dangerous second before answering. Everything here will be yours. Claire closed her eyes slowly. 5 years of marriage collapsed inside a single sentence. Downstairs, crystal glasses clinked softly while Manhattan snow continued falling beyond the windows. Claire looked once more at the sonogram paper in her trembling hand. 11 weeks. That meant Vanessa had already been pregnant while Damien stood beside Claire smiling for maternity photos 2 months earlier. The baby shifted hard beneath Claire's ribs as though reacting to the storm inside her chest. Then another sound broke through the silence. Her phone vibrated quietly inside her coat pocket. Unknown number again. One message. If you want the truth about Damien Sterling, meet me tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Come alone. Nathan Reed. At 7:58 the next morning, Claire stood outside a narrow brick building on West 47th Street, while freezing rain slid down the collar of her wool coat. The address did not make sense. No company logo. No luxury lobby. No polished glass walls like the offices Damien trusted. Just an old 4-story building squeezed between a closed tailor shop and a coffee stand releasing steam into the gray Manhattan air. Claire tightened her scarf instinctively over her stomach while yellow taxis splashed through puddles nearby. She almost turned around twice before. The front door opened. Nathan Reed stepped outside with the controlled posture of someone who noticed everything immediately. Tall, broad shoulders, dark overcoat. A faint scar crossed one side of his jawline, barely visible beneath the morning light. He did not smile when he saw her. You came alone, he said. Claire studied him carefully. You sent the messages. Nathan nodded once. Come inside before reporters recognize you. The room upstairs smelled like black coffee, old paper, and rain-soaked leather. Security monitors lined one wall beneath dim overhead lights. Claire noticed at least 12 different camera feeds from Sterling Tower displayed silently across the screens. Her heartbeat slowed for one dangerous second. Who are you? She asked quietly. Nathan removed his gloves and placed a file folder on the metal desk between them. 5 years ago, Damien Sterling hired my security firm to protect his company during a hostile acquisition. Claire frowned slightly. And now? Now I think your husband is preparing to destroy more than a marriage. The words settled heavily inside the small office. Outside the window, sirens echoed faintly through Manhattan traffic while rain streaked the glass in uneven lines. Nathan opened the folder slowly. Inside were photographs, financial reports, transfer records, hotel receipts. Claire recognized Damien immediately in several surveillance stills leaving private meetings with investors she had never heard him mention. Then Nathan slid one final image across the desk. Claire stopped breathing. It was the gala footage from the previous night. Crystal clear. Damien raising his hand. Her stunned expression. Vanessa standing behind him, smiling faintly beside the ballroom lights. How did you get this? Claire whispered. Nathan leaned back slightly. My firm still controls backup surveillance systems in Sterling Tower. Claire looked away from the image immediately. Somehow seeing the moment frozen in silence felt worse than living through it. Nathan watched her carefully before speaking again. That video is already being requested by 3 media outlets this morning. Claire's eyes snapped upward. No, I blocked the release temporarily. Nathan's voice remained calm. But Damien's legal team is already trying to erase every copy. Claire stared at him for several seconds. Why are you helping me? For the first time, Nathan hesitated. Then he reached toward another folder resting near the edge of the desk. Because you are not the first person Damien Sterling tried to bury. He opened the folder. A different woman stared back from the photographs. Blonde hair. Corporate ID badge. Hospital discharge forms dated 2 years earlier. Claire's stomach tightened. Who is she? Former executive assistant, Nathan replied quietly. She discovered financial fraud tied to Sterling Global accounts. 3 weeks later, she disappeared from the company completely. Damien paid for silence agreements and private settlements. Claire felt cold despite the heat inside the office. Nathan continued. You saw the offshore transfers last night, did not you? Claire nodded slowly. Nathan slid another document toward her. That money is not for divorce protection. Damien is moving assets before a federal investigation becomes public. Claire blinked hard. Investigation? Nathan's expression darkened slightly. Insider trading. Shell companies. Hidden acquisitions. If the board learns the truth, Sterling Global collapses overnight. The room suddenly felt smaller. Louder. Claire pressed a hand gently against her stomach while the baby moved restlessly beneath her coat. Why tell me now? Nathan stood and walked toward the rain-covered window overlooking the street below. Because Damien believes fear keeps people obedient. He turned back toward her slowly. But fear only works until someone decides they have nothing left to lose. Claire looked down again at the frozen image from the gala displayed beneath the desk lamp. Her face. Damien's hand. Vanessa's smile. A perfect public moment seconds before everything began breaking apart. Then Nathan spoke one final sentence that made the air leave her lungs completely. Claire Whitmore is not your original name, is it? The rain had stopped by the time Claire left Nathan Reed's office, but Manhattan still looked gray beneath low winter clouds hanging over the skyline like smoke. Traffic crawled slowly through Midtown while steam rose from subway grates along the sidewalks. Claire sat silently in the back of the Escalade with Nathan's file resting unopened beside her. One sentence repeated endlessly in her mind. Claire Whitmore is not your original name, is it? Marcus glanced once at her through the rearview mirror. Home, Mrs. Sterling? Claire stared out the window for several seconds before answering quietly. No, her voice sounded different now. Colder somehow. Take me to Lexington Avenue, 82nd Street. Marcus nodded immediately without asking questions. 20 minutes later, the Escalade stopped outside one of the oldest private law firms in Manhattan. Black iron gates. Limestone entrance. No flashy signs. Just a brass plaque near the doorway reading Whitmore and Associates. Claire stepped onto the sidewalk slowly, pulling her coat tighter around her stomach while icy wind swept fallen snow across the street corners. She had not stood outside this building in nearly 6 years. The receptionist inside recognized her instantly despite the years. Shock flashed across the older woman's face before professionalism returned. Miss Whitmore, she whispered softly. Not Mrs. Sterling. Not Claire Sterling. Miss Whitmore. The name landed heavily in the quiet marble lobby. Claire lowered her eyes briefly before speaking. Is she here? The receptionist hesitated only 1 second. Top floor. The private elevator opened directly into a massive office lined with dark wood shelves and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park dusted in snow. Judge Eleanor Whitmore stood beside the fireplace reading documents beneath warm amber light. Elegant. Controlled. Silver streaks threaded through her dark hair, but her sharp posture and calm expression still carried the same intimidating presence that once made federal prosecutors nervous inside courtrooms. She did not look surprised when Claire entered. I wondered how long it would take, Eleanor said quietly. Claire stopped several feet away. Suddenly, she felt 20 years old again instead of 32 and pregnant inside a collapsing marriage. You knew? Claire whispered. Eleanor closed the folder in her hands. About Damien? Yes. Claire stared at her in disbelief. You knew what he was doing to me? The fire cracked softly between them, while distant sirens echoed far below the skyscraper windows. Eleanor's expression shifted slightly, something close to regret crossing her face for half a second. I knew Damien Sterling married you for strategic reasons long before you realized it yourself. Claire felt anger rise sharply inside her chest. Then why did you let me stay with him? Eleanor walked slowly toward the window overlooking the park. Because you disappeared from this family 6 years ago and changed your name. Claire looked away immediately. The truth hurt because it was real. Claire Whitmore had not been born Claire Whitmore at all. Her original birth certificate read Claire Eleanor Bennett, daughter of a waitress from Brooklyn who died when Claire was 9 years old. Eleanor Whitmore had discovered the truth years later through private investigators and quietly brought Claire into the Whitmore family after DNA results confirmed everything. But Claire never felt comfortable inside that world of judges, senators, and billion-dollar donors. Then Damien Sterling arrived, charming, ambitious, and endlessly attentive. He made her feel chosen instead of managed. Eleanor finally turned back toward her. You thought Damien loved you because you were ordinary, she said softly. The problem was that men like Damien Sterling never search for ordinary women. They search for leverage. Claire's throat tightened painfully. Eleanor stepped closer and placed a thick file onto the desk between them. Corporate ownership records. Sterling Tower Holdings. Majority shareholder agreements. Claire stared at the signatures in stunned silence. What is this? Eleanor's eyes remained fixed on her daughter. 3 years ago, before your wedding, I transferred 51% ownership of Sterling Tower into your trust. Claire blinked hard. Damien does not know? No, the room suddenly felt still. Dangerous. Claire slowly looked down at the papers again, while her heartbeat echoed loudly in her ears. 51%. Control. Ownership. Everything Damien believed belonged to him had never legally been his at all. Eleanor's voice lowered carefully. Claire, if Damien's financial crimes become public, Sterling Global will collapse within days. Claire pressed one trembling hand against her stomach as the baby shifted beneath her coat again. Outside the window, snow began falling across Manhattan for the second time that day. Then Eleanor delivered the sentence that changed everything completely. And when it does, she said quietly, your husband is going to discover he spent 5 years trying to destroy the one person who legally owns his empire. By Thursday morning, Manhattan financial media had started whispering Damien Sterling's name with the cautious tone people used before disasters became public. Inside Sterling Global headquarters, executives moved through glass hallways carrying tablets and legal folders while assistants avoided eye contact and stock analysts refreshed market screens every 30 seconds. Something was shifting beneath the company, and everyone could feel it even if nobody understood why yet. Damien stood inside the executive boardroom, staring at numbers projected across a 40-foot screen while snow drifted silently outside the skyscraper windows. Why are the Zurich accounts frozen? He demanded sharply. No one answered immediately. The chief financial officer adjusted his glasses nervously. We are still investigating the authorization reversal. Damien's jaw tightened. Investigating. The room remained painfully still beneath white recessed lights and polished oak walls. Then one of the legal advisors cleared his throat carefully. The transfer freeze came from Majority Ownership Authority. Damien slowly turned. That is impossible. Across the city, Claire sat quietly inside a private tailor studio overlooking Fifth Avenue while soft jazz played from hidden speakers. The room smelled faintly of espresso and fresh fabric. Bolts of silk-lined cream-colored walls beside oversized mirrors glowing beneath warm light. A stylist adjusted the sleeve of Claire's ivory coat, while another pinned alterations near the waist to accommodate her pregnancy. For the first time in years, Claire noticed something strange inside herself. Calm. Not happiness. Not revenge. Just clarity. Nathan Reed stood near the window reviewing files on a tablet, while rain mixed with melting snow outside the crowded avenue below. The board meeting begins at noon, he said quietly. Claire looked at her reflection. Her hair had been swept back neatly. Minimal jewelry. No dramatic makeup. No visible signs of weakness. She looked less like Damien Sterling's wife and more like someone dangerous enough to stand beside him as an equal. And Damien? She asked softly. Nathan glanced toward her. He has spent the last 4 hours trying to identify who froze his offshore accounts. Claire lowered her eyes briefly toward the baby moving beneath her coat. Has he figured it out? Nathan almost smiled. Not yet. 2 floors below the Sterling Global boardroom, news alerts exploded across financial websites simultaneously. Federal inquiry rumored into Sterling Global acquisitions. Anonymous source claims internal corruption investigation expanding. Stock prices dipped immediately, then dipped again harder. Inside the boardroom, Damien's phone vibrated nonstop across the polished table while investors exchanged nervous looks. Who authorized this leak? Damien snapped. One of the board members answered carefully. The media received documents this morning. Damien's pulse visibly tightened beneath the collar of his charcoal suit. From who? No answer came. Because no one knew. 40 minutes later, Claire entered Whitmore and Associates carrying a leather folder against her chest, while Nathan walked beside her through crowded marble corridors filled with attorneys and federal clerks. Several people recognized Judge Eleanor Whitmore's daughter immediately, even though Claire had avoided public appearances with her family for years. Whispers followed behind them anyway. Claire Whitmore, not Claire Sterling. The distinction mattered now. Eleanor waited inside the conference room beside towering windows overlooking Lower Manhattan. Legal documents covered the table in organized stacks. Property transfers, board authority notices, emergency trust, activations. Claire stopped when she saw the final folder near the center. Sterling Tower ownership confirmation. Majority shareholder, Claire Eleanor Whitmore. Her fingers trembled slightly against the leather folder she carried. Eleanor looked up calmly. It is time. Claire inhaled slowly. Once this starts, there is no going back. Eleanor's voice remained steady. Damien Sterling built his empire believing power belonged only to the loudest man in the room. Nathan placed another document before Claire. Emergency board injunction. All executive asset transfers suspended effective immediately. Claire stared at the signature line waiting at the bottom of the page. Outside the window, snow melted slowly against Manhattan rooftops while helicopters drifted across gray skies above Wall Street. Somewhere downtown, reporters were already gathering outside Sterling Global headquarters. Claire picked up the pen carefully. For years, Damien controlled every room she entered. Every schedule, every headline, every silence. But fear changes shape once the truth becomes visible. Claire signed her full legal name slowly across the page. Claire Eleanor Whitmore. Nathan looked toward the television mounted silently in the corner of the room, where Sterling Global stock continued falling in real time beneath bright red numbers. Then his phone buzzed once. He glanced at the message and lifted his eyes toward Claire immediately. Damien just called an emergency press conference, he said quietly. Eleanor closed the final folder with controlled precision. Good, she replied. Let him walk onto the stage before he realizes the floor beneath him no longer belongs to him. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, every major financial network in America had parked satellite trucks outside Sterling Global headquarters. Snowmelt dripped from steel barricades while reporters in dark winter coats spoke urgently into cameras beneath flashing red news banners. Sterling Global stock plunges amid corruption rumors. Emergency board session underway. Investors demand answers. Inside the building, the atmosphere felt colder than the December air outside. Executives moved through the marble lobby in silence while security teams checked credentials twice before allowing anyone near the elevators. On the 42nd floor, Damien Sterling adjusted his tie in the reflection of a black glass conference room wall, while television screens replayed footage from his emergency press conference an hour earlier. Calm voice, controlled posture, corporate confidence. But his eyes betrayed him now. Small details always did. The loosened cufflink. The untouched coffee beside his hand. The way his jaw tightened each time his phone vibrated with another incoming call from investors. Sir, one assistant said nervously from the doorway. The board is ready. Damien nodded once and stepped into the conference room, carrying the same arrogance that built Sterling Global from a startup into a billion-dollar empire. 12 board members sat around the polished table beneath recessed lighting, while legal advisors whispered quietly near the windows overlooking Manhattan. At the far end of the room sat Vanessa Hale wearing an ivory designer coat and carefully composed expression. Her fingers rested protectively over her stomach as cameras outside continued flashing through the glass walls. Damien took his seat confidently. Let us begin. Then the doors opened again. Every conversation stopped instantly. Claire entered beside Nathan Reed wearing a tailored white coat over a charcoal maternity dress, her hair pinned neatly away from her face. No trembling hands. No tears. No fear. Just silence. The kind that makes powerful people uncomfortable. Damien stared at her as though seeing a stranger for the first time. Claire, he said carefully, forcing calm into his voice. This meeting is restricted. Nathan placed a leather folder onto the conference table. Not anymore. Several board members exchanged nervous looks. Claire moved slowly toward the empty seat directly across from Damien and lowered herself into the chair with controlled grace. The baby shifted beneath her dress as though sensing the tension flooding the room. Damien leaned forward. What exactly are you doing? Claire met his eyes steadily. Finishing something you started. Vanessa gave a quiet laugh beside him. This is pathetic. Nathan slid multiple documents across the polished table toward the board members. Federal inquiry notices. Offshore transfer records. Unauthorized shell companies linked directly to Sterling Global acquisitions. One older investor removed his glasses completely while reading the pages. Another whispered, "My God." Damien's face hardened instantly. These accusations are fabricated. Nathan reached toward the wall monitor remote without responding. The giant screen flickered once. Then security footage from the charity gala appeared in perfect clarity across 40 feet of digital display. The ballroom. The chandeliers. Claire standing frozen beside table 12. Damien's hand moving sharply through the frame. Silence swallowed the room. Even the city noise outside seemed to disappear for one endless second. Vanessa's expression collapsed first. Damien stood abruptly. Turn that off. Nathan did not move. The footage continued replaying silently above them while camera flashes exploded outside the glass walls from reporters noticing the sudden movement inside the boardroom. One investor leaned back slowly in disbelief. Another looked directly at Claire with visible shame. Damien turned toward Nathan furiously. You have no authority here. That was the moment Claire opened the leather folder resting calmly before her. Her voice remained quiet when she spoke, but every word landed like falling steel. Actually, she said, he does. She slid the ownership documents across the table toward the board. Majority shareholder confirmation. Sterling Tower Holdings. Claire Eleanor Whitmore. 51% controlling interest. Damien stared at the papers without blinking. Color slowly drained from his face. No, he whispered. Claire held his gaze steadily across the conference table while snow drifted outside the skyscraper windows behind her. You spent 5 years believing everything in this building belonged to you, she said softly. But legally, it never did. Then the conference room doors opened one final time. Judge Eleanor Whitmore entered surrounded by federal attorneys carrying sealed documents beneath the flashing lights of dozens of cameras now turning toward the room outside. Damien's breathing visibly slowed as realization finally reached him. Eleanor removed her gloves carefully before speaking. Mr. Sterling, she said calmly, this board meeting is now part of an active federal investigation. Across Manhattan, financial markets reacted within seconds. Sterling Global stock collapsed another 30% before trading was suspended entirely. The collapse of Sterling Global happened faster than anyone on Wall Street thought possible. By sunrise the next morning, every financial channel in America displayed the same red breaking news banner across their screens. Sterling Global under federal investigation. Billionaire CEO removed by emergency board vote. Trading suspended indefinitely. Outside the company headquarters, reporters crowded behind steel barricades while snow turned to freezing rain beneath flashing police lights and satellite trucks. People who once waited hours for Damien Sterling's attention now refused to answer calls from his office. Investors vanished overnight. Partnerships dissolved before lunch. One network anchor called it the fastest corporate implosion since the financial crisis. Another called it karma in a $12,000 suit. Inside the nearly empty penthouse overlooking Central Park, Damien sat alone at the dining table still wearing yesterday's dress shirt. The television reflected across the dark windows behind him while untouched coffee grew cold beside scattered legal papers. Every few minutes another notification appeared across his phone screen. Account access suspended. Emergency audit request. Board authorization revoked. Damien stared blankly at the messages, as if refusing to understand the language itself. Then came the final headline. Claire Eleanor Whitmore confirmed as majority owner of Sterling Tower Holdings. Damien slowly closed his eyes. Somewhere downstairs the elevator chimed softly. Vanessa entered carrying 2 shopping bags and an irritated expression already fading into panic. There are reporters outside the building, she snapped immediately. Someone leaked my pregnancy records online. Damien did not answer. Vanessa stopped. When she saw the television screen, Claire's image filled the broadcast beside Nathan Reed and Judge Eleanor Whitmore, while reporters shouted questions outside federal court downtown. Calm, elegant, untouchable. Vanessa looked back toward Damien sharply. Tell me this is temporary. Silence. Damien. He finally lifted his eyes toward her. For the first time since she met him, he looked tired instead of powerful. Leave, he said quietly. Vanessa blinked in disbelief. Excuse me. I said leave. Panic flickered visibly across her face. You promised me this life. Damien laughed once under his breath, but there was nothing warm inside the sound. Apparently none of it belonged to me. Across Manhattan, Claire stepped carefully through the private maternity wing of St. Vincent Medical Center, while nurses smiled softly in recognition from television coverage already spreading nationwide. The hall smelled faintly of antiseptic and fresh coffee, while evening rain streaked the hospital windows overlooking the city. Nathan walked beside her carrying legal folders beneath one arm, while security officers remained discreetly near the elevators. The board voted unanimously. Nathan said quietly. Damien Sterling is officially removed from all executive authority. Claire lowered herself carefully into a chair near the window. Exhaustion finally settling across her face after 48 hours of non-stop legal meetings and media chaos. And Vanessa? Nathan glanced briefly at the folder in his hands. Federal investigators found evidence of falsified financial disclosures tied to offshore transfers. Claire looked down at her stomach where the baby moved slowly beneath the blanket covering her knees. The child had become strangely calm tonight, almost as though the storm surrounding them had finally begun fading. Then movement outside the hospital entrance caught Nathan's attention. Down below in the rain, Damien Sterling stood beside the front security gate wearing a dark overcoat soaked by freezing drizzle. No cameras surrounded him now. No investors. No assistants rushing beside him. Just one man standing alone beneath the glow of hospital lights. Claire stared silently through the glass while Damien looked upward toward the building as though hoping she might appear. Nathan spoke carefully. Do you want security to remove him? Claire watched Damien for several long seconds. This man once controlled billion-dollar negotiations with a single phone call. Tonight, he looked smaller than the rain falling around him. No, she whispered softly. Let him stand there. Down on the sidewalk, Damien remained motionless while taxis splashed through puddles nearby and strangers walked past without recognizing him. High above the city, Claire rested one hand protectively over her stomach and looked away from the window at last. Somewhere deep inside Sterling Tower, movers were already removing Damien Sterling's name from the executive offices before morning. 3 weeks later, the first snowstorm of January covered Manhattan in silence. White powder drifted across empty sidewalks and settled along the edges of Central Park while the city lights glowed softly beneath the winter sky. Inside the private maternity suite at St. Vincent Medical Center, warm amber lights spilled across cream-colored walls and quiet monitors hummed steadily beside the hospital bed. Claire Whitmore sat near the window wrapped in a pale gray blanket, gently rocking her newborn son against her chest while snow fell beyond the glass 30 floors above the city streets. The baby slept peacefully beneath the soft blue knit cap one of the nurses had placed on him earlier that morning. Tiny fingers curled instinctively around the edge of Claire's sleeve each time he moved. For the first time in years, the room around her felt calm. No cameras. No board meetings. No whispered humiliation hidden behind champagne glasses and charity smiles. Just the sound of her son breathing softly against her heartbeat. Nathan Reed stood quietly near the doorway holding 2 paper coffee cups while Eleanor Whitmore reviewed documents beside the fireplace across the room. Even she looked softer tonight somehow, less like the federal judge who dismantled billion-dollar corporations and more like a grandmother staring quietly at a sleeping child. The television mounted near the corner. of the suite played silently beneath closed captions. Former Sterling Global CEO Damien Sterling agrees to federal settlement. Multiple assets seized during ongoing investigation. Claire watched the screen only briefly before lowering her eyes back to her son. Nathan handed her a cup carefully. The board finalized everything this afternoon, he said quietly. Sterling Tower officially transfers into Whitmore Holdings tomorrow morning. Claire accepted the coffee with a faint nod. Steam curled gently into the warm hospital air while distant sirens echoed somewhere far below the snowy streets. "And Damien?" she asked softly. Nathan hesitated before answering. "He left Manhattan yesterday." Eleanor closed the legal folder in her hands. "His attorneys recommended privacy before the federal hearings begin." Claire absorbed the words silently. Months ago, hearing Damien Sterling's name could still make her chest tighten with fear, guilt, confusion, all tangled together like broken glass beneath skin. Tonight she felt only distance. Somewhere along the way the grief had burned itself out completely. The hospital door opened quietly as a nurse entered carrying fresh blankets and smiling warmly toward the baby. "He is beautiful," she whispered. Claire smiled back faintly. "Thank you." The nurse adjusted the flowers near the window and paused briefly. "There are reporters downstairs again," she said apologetically. Security already turned them away. Nathan glanced toward the snowy glass overlooking Manhattan. "They are calling it the downfall heard around the world." Claire gave a quiet breath that almost sounded like laughter. 20 million people had watched the gala footage online within 48 hours. Commentators debated it for weeks. Financial analysts studied Sterling Global's collapse in business schools before the month even ended. But none of that mattered inside this room tonight. Claire brushed her fingertips gently across her son's cheek while city lights flickered softly across the snow outside. Then movement near the hospital entrance far below caught her attention. A single man stood across the street beneath a street lamp glowing pale gold through the snowfall. Dark coat, hands in his pockets. Motionless. Damien. Even from 30 floors above, Claire recognized the way he carried himself. Alone now. No drivers. No cameras. No empire waiting behind him. Just a man standing quietly in the cold, watching a life continue without him. Nathan followed her gaze toward the window, but said nothing. Claire stared for only a few seconds before slowly turning away. She no longer needed him to suffer in order to heal. That was the strange thing about surviving someone who tried to break you. Eventually, their destruction stopped feeling like victory and started feeling like distance. Claire kissed the top of her son's head gently, while snow continued falling over Manhattan in silence. Behind her, the television screen flashed another headline about Damien Sterling losing millions in federal settlements. But Claire never looked back toward it again. She simply held her child closer and watched the storm outside soften the city lights one snowflake at a time. Because some men spend their entire lives chasing power only to discover too late that real power was never about control at all. Real power was protecting the people who trusted you not to let them fall.